Hi, and welcome to this third video in the series that I'm calling the Unlast Days of Jesus. The Unlast Days of Jesus. My name is Michael Venema, and I'm so glad you're able to join us. Thank you for doing that. Welcome. Please don't forget to subscribe and to like and to share and those good things when the video is over. So in the first two of this series, in the first video, we looked at Jesus's entry into the city of Jerusalem. So this taking place about 2,000 years ago in the final week of his life. He's entering Jerusalem, and he's doing so in a way that undercuts the authority of the religious leadership there, and it threatens them. And Jesus makes some comments that suggest that the vast Jerusalem temple, very valued by the Jewish people and also valued by the Romans who built it as a way of keeping the Jewish people content, a vast temple worth an enormous sum of money. Jesus suggesting that its days were numbered and that its time, its era was over. So that disturbed them. In the next chapter, so that takes care of the second video that's in the series. In the second chapter, Jesus took care of a number of debates and teachings, kind of as if these were among his last words for his audiences, as if to say, I'm going to be leaving the scene soon, so here are some more important things that I really want you to keep in mind as the days, the weeks, the months, and the years move forward. Now, I recalled a minute ago that in the first video, we did consider how Jesus had, in his own way, threatened the temple and disturbed people with thoughts that it might be destroyed. And that may seem like kind of a strange thing for Jesus to say, if you know anything about the temple and as it appeared, because it was massive, a colossal building, enormous stones, beautifully constructed, large, solid courtyards where thousands of people would gather for the different Jewish feasts, and such an impressive structure. And you would wonder, why is Jesus talking about the destruction of the temple? And would that really have been considered a viable possibility for the people listening to Jesus? Would they really have taken seriously the idea that this massive, beautiful, valued building could be destroyed? So two stories. One goes back to about 150 years before Jesus, around the year 160s, 167, before Jesus, before Christ, BC, or as some people today like to say, before the Common Era. And the second story takes place a few decades after Jesus' birth, so just a decade, maybe a little bit more, after Jesus had finished his earthly mission. So the first story, and so in this story, the Jewish people are being governed by an emperor out of Egypt. They don't like it. At one point, the local governor, Antiochus, heads back to Egypt to look after some business. While he's away, the Jewish people revolt, and they get rid of the Jewish high priest that had been appointed by the government, and they set up their own, and they take over the temple. Well, when the local ruler Antiochus, who the Jewish people had heard that he had died, but he hadn't died, so he came back and he was enraged. He slaughtered thousands of people on his way back to Jerusalem, and once he got back there, many more Jewish people were killed. Everything was turned into a total confusion and uproar, and he ordered the erecting of a statue of the Greek god Zeus in the Jerusalem temple. Well, this would have been considered the most offensive and vile thing that anyone could do. You can't have a pagan god represented in the Jewish temple, which is dedicated to the Jewish God, the living, the true God. So this was a disastrous thing. There was, I'm not familiar totally with all the details any longer, but there's a story involving the sacrifice of a pig in the Jewish temple. The high priest refuses, so he's cut down, he's killed by the authorities. So these terribly offensive things, religiously offensive abominations, so to speak, taking place in Jerusalem, the slaughter of the Jewish people, terrible things. So could terrible things happen within the Jewish temple that existed in Jesus' time? Sure. And could catastrophes and even destruction happen? I think that earlier story reminds us that yes, things of that scale could take place. Fast forward to the second story. This takes place a little bit after the activities of Jesus. Caligula is the emperor of Rome. Already up to this point, there have been many battles. There have been revolts by the Jewish people against the Roman government. The Jewish people are no longer governed from Egypt, but now governed from Rome. It's the Roman Empire, and there are revolts. They're quite successful, and the Romans have to send in legion after legion to take care of these Jewish revolts. And there's an enormous amount of bloodshed. Caligula is the emperor during part of this time, and at one point he orders the erection of a statue of himself in the temple in Jerusalem. So a similar kind of thing. And the outcry, the outrage is intense. Again, the tensions, the battles, the slaughters that take place are unbelievable. And this leads into what is known as the Roman war against the Jewish people, which started roughly in the year 66 in earnest and ended in the year 70, which war ended with the complete destruction of the Jerusalem temple. The Romans came in, they destroyed it. Whatever was burnable was burnt. The stones were toppled one over the other, so all the buildings were destroyed. And some of the valuable artifacts inside the temple, a golden menorah and a golden table of what was called, I think, the table of the presence of God, was taken and paraded in the streets of Rome as the spoils of victory. And actually, you can see that event depicted on the Arch of Titus, who was the emperor at the time, the Arch of Titus, which still exists in the city of Rome. And you can see this event depicted, that is the parading of the valuables from the temple through the city of Rome, as a way of the emperor celebrating with the citizens of Rome his victory over the Jewish people. So on the one hand, before Jesus, terrible times, unbelievably destructive times. On the one hand, after Jesus, the actual destruction of the enormous Jewish temple in Jerusalem. So when Jesus in Mark chapter 11 talks about the destruction of the temple, or at least he suggests that its days are numbered, this is going to raise all kinds of tensions and difficulties and opposition from the leadership of the Jewish people. They don't want any kind of thing like this happening, but it is a real possibility because the political situation between the Jewish people and their Roman overlords was always tense, always fraught with simmering rebellions. And you can see many evidences of that throughout the New Testament. And of course, it's also written up in all the other history books. I say other history books because I consider the New Testament to be essentially pretty good history. So now I want to get to chapter 13, because then you'll see how some of chapter 13 makes sense. So I'm going to start reading, and I'm reading from a version called The Message, which tends to play a little bit loose with the accuracy in terms of the translating, but I like it because I think it captures the dynamism of the original text. So there's lots of very accurate texts. but this one is very dynamic, and so I like to use it. And for people who are not used to reading the more accurate versions of the Bible and who maybe have not read the Bible at all, I hope that a lot of such are among our viewers. For those of you like that, this kind of reading, I think, will be a little more accessible. So here we go. As Jesus walked away from the temple, one of his disciples says, "Teacher, look at all the stonework, these buildings." Jesus says, "You are impressed by this grandiose architecture. There is not a stone in the whole works that is not going to end up in a heap of rubble." Why is Jesus saying that? Is it because he's got a video camera, so to speak, a prophetic video camera into the future? He knows exactly what's going to happen. Well, I don't want to discount that, that he knows what's going to happen. But I think that we ought to see it also in some more concrete terms. Jesus knows the story of the past, of the destruction of the temple and the attacks on it. And he also knows the current political situation. And there are other stories further back in the Jewish faith and history of the Jerusalem temple being destroyed, being overrun by enemies and destroyed. So I think Jesus is sensitive to the fact that the stories that have played out in the past of opposition against the Jewish people, destruction, bloodshed, that story is about to be replayed again, because you can feel it in the air. You can see it. And so, of course, Jesus is one of God's prophet, the final prophet. He's the greatest of them all, and he has a prophetic gift, but he also is firmly rooted in the stories of the past and in an awareness of the present and the potentialities for terrible destruction. So, anyway, then we continue on. Later, as they were sitting on the Mount of Olives, so they can see the temple in front of them in full view of the temple, Peter, James, and John and Andrew got Jesus off by himself, and they asked, "Tell us, when is this going to happen? What sign will we get that these things are coming to a head? Because if we know when they're going to start coming, we're going to, get out of town." So Jesus kind of circles back around some of these concerns, and he doesn't answer them directly, but he says, watch out for doomsday deceivers. Many leaders are going to show up, and they're going to claim that I'm the leader that God has sent to get you out of trouble. Follow me. And Jesus says, don't follow these people. Don't follow these characters. They may be well-meaning, but they are deceived, and they're going to deceive the people who follow them. You're going to create a lot of trouble for yourself if you follow a leader who generates a rebellion against the Romans, and it will be terrible. Don't go with these people. This, by the way, did happen from time to time in and around Jesus' lifetime, and Jesus was perceived as someone who could do this, which is another reason he had many enemies. But anyway, Jesus says to his listeners, don't follow these people. And he says, when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, which you're going to hear plenty of, because there's always wars and rumors of war in the Roman Empire. On the frontiers of the empire, there's constant battles with barbarians. And if you know anything about the history of Roman government and the way Rome conducted itself as an empire, look at any of the television series. Rome comes to mind, I, Claudius, other maybe more recent ones, but they all depict Rome as a very conflicted empire in which the ruling families were constantly murdering off each other to hang on to power and to get hold of it. So Jesus says, when you hear about these kinds of things, wars and rumors of wars, don't assume that there's anything really spectacular coming up, and you'll hear about earthquakes and famines and these kinds of things. And oftentimes people back then would regard these things as possible signs from God or signs from heaven or whatever, that big changes were afoot. Jesus says, keep a cool head. These are just the ongoing, ordinary, maybe not so pleasant, but ordinary workings of our world. Tragic as it is, these things happen. So then Jesus also continues on, and he's got some kind of personal concern for the disciples, because he says, you guys, you people, you followers of mine, you're going to get dragged into the courts, and people are going to want to do you in. And nevertheless, I want you to stay true to the mission I have for you, and that is to keep preaching the good news that I have told you to the rest of the world. And you will be betrayed in the courts, and maybe some of your family members will speak out against you. And these kinds of things did happen. If you look a little further into some of the stories I've started to mention about Caligula and those times and what they were like for the Jewish people, you'll discover that there were times when the Jewish people were fighting amongst themselves because, man, it's so difficult. What do we do now? Who do we follow? How do we survive this decade, this year, this day, this week? There's lives on the line in the decisions we make. So there's lots of tension, lots of familial and inter-community conflict. So anyway, Jesus says, just you disciples of mine, this is what I want you to do. I want you to keep spreading the message that I'm giving you. That's what you've got to do. It's not your business to get involved in one side of a battle or one side of another, but you just keep doing what I'm telling you to do. It's not for you to take up arms and to lead people this or that way, but you just keep spreading my message to the people. Okay, I'm going to fast forward a tiny bit, and in the next part of this chapter, the subtitle reads, "Run for the Hills." And so now you can see why this message of running for the hills makes total sense, because Jesus now says, be ready to run for it when you see the monster of desecration set up where it should never be. In some of the Bible translations that uses this very impressive phrase, the abomination of desecration. So the word desecrate, think of the word sacred. If you sacralize something, you make it sacred, you make it holy. If you desecrate it, you de-holyize it, you desacralize it, you pollute it, you destroy it. And so when you see the monster of desecration, think of that statue of Zeus. Think of Caligula commanding that a statue of him be set up in the Jerusalem temple. When you see these kinds of things, Jesus says, when you see the Roman authorities enter the Jerusalem temple, the Holy of Holies, which would have been considered a tremendous abomination, a desecration by the Jewish people. When you see these things, Jesus says, don't hold back. Get out of town. Flee for your lives. And if these are figures of speech. Don't go back into your house to get your jacket. Just go to the hills, because the bloodletting is going to be so terrible. Get away from there. And Jesus uses some other figures of speech, pregnant and nursing mothers. I don't think this is necessarily a figure of speech. Pregnant and nursing mothers will have it very hard. So anyway, Jesus says, watch out for these terrible things, and leave the area. And then Jesus says, if anyone tries to flag you down and calls out, here I am, God's leader, follow me. Don't follow them. Just leave. And again, escape. And I want you to keep yourselves for the spreading of the good news that I have left with you. So then there's some curious lines which are a little bit hard to figure out. The sun will fade out, the moon will cloud over, stars will fall out of the sky, and cosmic powers will tremble. Sometimes people wonder what to do with these words, and the way that I've come to understand them is that what they signify, what they say is, for people living through such unbelievably terrible times, it will be as if the entire universe is being turned upside down. All kinds of moral chaos. What should be kept alive will be killed, and those who should be done away with are the murderers and the killers who prosper. There's a account I came across one time in a talk by I think it's Jordan Peterson, and he talks about a story where a Polish woman is talking about a situation during World War II where her area was overrun by fighting, and it was as if everything had been turned upside down. The killers who should have been done away with were continuing to rampage and to murder and to rape and to torture. And the people who should have been protected had no protection. Everything was turned upside down. You might say the moon had been darkened and the sun had been turned off, and everything had become bloody and dark. The cosmic powers tremble. The stars fell out of the sky. So Jesus is saying this is how it's going to be. It's going to be so terrifying, so dark. Okay, now, and then Jesus says, but the exact hour and the day, well, he says, God knows that. No one else does. But you, my followers, he says, I want you to remain faithful. You stay with the program that I am giving you. Everything may seem like it's falling apart, and it may fall apart around you. Everything may come crashing down on your heads, but you stay with what I've given to you. And I think that this is a great place to just pause before our next video, because I think that here is something that's very relevant to God's people of every time and every place. All kinds of terrifying things may happen. Many of God's people today live in parts of the world where things are relatively at peace and many things are settled, which is all to the good. But others are living in very terrifying times and situations. It's hard to know, when these things will change for any of us, when rough situations will become more peaceful and when peaceful situations will become rougher for God's people. Nevertheless, it's not our job to join one faction or the other, or to do this or to do that. It's the job of God's people to stay with the message of Jesus Christ and to keep on broadcasting that. Be faithful and stay with him. Okay, that's the end of our third video, and the next video we'll look at Mark chapter 14, and I will see you then. Bye-bye for now. Thanks again so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and hit the notification bell so that you will know about new videos coming out. See you next time.